Good evening. Today is Thursday, October 24th, and we'll begin this evening with public comment 1 of 2. If you're present in person and would like to address the board, please move to the table in the center of the room. Okay. Turn on the mic, state your name and town of residence. You'll have 3 minutes. If your comment is in the form of a question regarding matters not included on the posted agenda for the evening, you may provide your contact information to our minute taker today so that we may follow up with a response via email if appropriate. Or if your question requires a broader discussion, we may address it on the agenda at a future meeting, and you will notify us so that you may attend or follow the minutes. I'm sorry, yes. If the item in question is a topic of discussion posted in this evening's agenda, the discussion around the topic may answer your question. We will also now accept public comment from the virtual audience members as well, as allowed by statute. If you are online and wish to address the board, please make certain that your full name is typed in your profile. Anyone?
No hands up.
Okay, no hands raised. So at this time, we will close the first public comment, and there will be another opportunity for the public to address the board later in the evening. All right, so moving to the consent agenda, we have 2 items, the draft minutes from September 26th and a budget transfer. Is there any need to separate those out? Okay.
Amy, can you, I think it's just the wording, but the transfer that's in there, so the savings reduces health insurance coverage. I think it doesn't mean, it just means being transferred to an account for health insurance. It's not reducing coverage. Do you know, like the wording sounds funny? I think we should be careful.
Yeah,
That's what I'm assuming it's just going to the health insurance account.
there was an unanticipated cost. So,
Okay.
If there are no more concerns, I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion is made by Mr. White. Anyone else?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stokinger. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed or abstaining? Oh, roll call, yeah, I'm so sorry. And before we do that, Mr. Glover, could you please confirm that you are alone and unable to be here this evening?
Both, yes, thank you.
And Mr. Torres as well?
Torres as well.
And we will start with the 2 of you, beginning with Mr. Glover for the roll call vote.
Glover, yes.
Torres abstain. White, yes.
Terry, we're just voting on the consent agenda. You're welcome to abstain if you'd like. Abstain.
Caucus.
Include,
Run, yes.
Gascoigne, yes.
Peters, yes.
Here, yes. Keep yes. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, so on to the reports. We have a treasurer's report and enrollment data. Questions, comments, concerns on any of that? All right, great. So, okay, we'll move into our SAU budget presentation. So I'll turn over to Ms. Beatty.
Well, now you gotta wait for me because I gotta share the screen.
That's the sentence simply. He's gonna project.
Squeeze that up. I'm gonna try and slideshow.
It
Yeah, it's actually not in there yet. Maybe there's some delay.
didn't have to be published. Oh, maybe you have to read it.
Go into.
It's
Oh, hold on. There, okay, great. Yes, thank you. Okay. So, this is draft 2 of the SAU budget. So, taking out a lot of the explanation slides, so that it's just kind of the nitty gritty and then some dates as well. So the FY '26 budget is now a 5.9% increase, or 183,409 on the FY '25 adopted budget. As we went over last time, the budget is divided into two main categories: personnel, that includes the salaries and benefits, and non-personnel, that's the facilities, technology, and operations. So for personnel, a major driver of this budget is a significant increase in health insurance and dental. The draft one, we did not have those increases yet, but we have received them. And for health and dental, they are a range, or for health, they're a range of 12.4% to 16.8%, depending on health plan. And dental is capped at 5%. So the total health and dental insurance that added over $83,000 to this budget. The proposed 3% salary and benefit pool as a COLA, same as last year, and there's also the $5,000 merit pool, plus related benefits. So, and just as a reminder, that merit pool does not add to the employee's base salary. New Hampshire retirement was reduced by 0.41% for teachers and 0.8% for non-teachers. And this is the new rate set for 2 years. And for non-personnel, there were some small increases in technology, facilities, and operations. So in draft 2, we like to show the changes from draft 1 to draft 2. Almost all of the changes are due to the health rates. As I said, draft 1 included a projected rate of 10% for health and 5% for dental. The only other change in this budget is a reduction of $1,000 in projected electricity costs based on a newly signed contract and updated supply and delivery rates. So the total change from draft 1 to draft 2 is $16,302. So this chart breaks out the FY '26 proposed SAU budget by the major categories of salaries, benefits, technology, facilities, and operations, and shows the dollar amount increase and the percent change of the total budget. So the increase in benefits, as stated, is primarily due to the health and dental, as well as a change in healthcare elections. The salary increases are due primarily to wage increases and a retirement payout. The other budget changes are smaller increases, technology 0.2% due to software costs, and a net decrease actually in replacement equipment based on need. Operations just 0.1%, primarily due to consulting costs for a strategic plan. The folding machine in the business office, some furniture replacement, and as we discussed last time, we were able to eliminate that courier position and have someone in the business office cover that. Facilities is projected increase for utilities, increase in HVAC supplies, and actually a decrease in service funds. So this is a new slide requested by a SAU budget committee member. So I thought it was a really good suggestion. So this shows the proposed budget change by category. We do this in the school district budgets. So it's really the same dollar amount change information as the previous slide, but shows the percent change from year to year. So from FY '25 to '26, as opposed to the percent as a total of the budget. So this provides an additional analysis of the changes from year to year. So again, as expected, the benefits category is the largest increase of 10.8%. And that includes the health dental increases, the New Hampshire retirement decreases, the 403B match, FICA, workers' comp, unemployment compensation, PD, and tuition reimbursement. Salaries are increasing by 3.7% from year to year. Technology, operations, and facilities are increasing by relatively small dollar amounts. Percent increases are 3.6, 3.8, and 4.9 respectively. So this slide is not a year-to-year comparison, but rather the allocation in each category as a percent of the total budget and shown in a visual pie chart. So as expected, the majority of the costs at the SAU are for salaries and benefits. And the other categories are smaller, 4%, 2%. And this is almost identical in terms of ratios compared to last year's budget. So the apportionment, so the SAU budget is incorporated into the 3 school district budgets according to an apportionment formula. So the total budget is offset by revenues that come in from 2 places, unassigned fund balance and E-rate revenue. So E-rate revenue is generated from discounts received on telecommunications, internet access, and internal connections, and in turn, we're able to offset some of our technology costs in the budget. Fund balance is calculated using the unassigned fund balance from 2 years ago, reduced by the revenue retained to offset current year SEO apportionment, and then the balance is used to offset the budget year. I'll talk a little bit more in detail. I know it's confusing, but that's just a precursor. So the percent apportioned to each district is based on a formula that incorporates the average daily membership and attendance for each district and the equalized valuation of property. The average daily membership and attendance, or the ADMA numbers, have not yet been posted by the Department of Education. So right now I'm using October 1 numbers as a placeholder. This will definitely change for public hearing, but it's all I have right now. As soon as those ADMA numbers are posted, we'll recalculate the actual apportionments to the school districts. So this is a year-to-year apportionment comparison of both expenditures and revenues. So as discussed, the amount apportioned to the districts is the expenditure budget less revenues from E-rate and fund balance. So also discussed, the expenditure increase is the $183,409. On the revenue side, there's actually $147,021 less revenue available in FY26 than what's available in FY25. Some of you might remember last year, we had more revenue, so the apportionment was less. But unfortunately, this year, this goes in the opposite direction for the apportionment. So the FY25 revenue was over $193,000 as compared to just over $46,000 for FY. So the way we calculate the fund balance for the SEU is to take the fund balance from 2 years ago, less the revenue retained for the current year, so for this year. And then that's the amount of revenue that's used to offset the expenditures for the budget year. The FY23 fund balance was high, primarily due to savings from having 1 less employee. The assistant superintendent position was not filled. So there was over $243,000 in fund balance that was in FY23. The fund balance retained for 24 was just over 74,000. So the resulting amount used to offset 25 was 168,000. And then you add the E-rate, and that's where you get the 193. So for FY26 budget, the fund balance for 24 was about 190. You deduct that FY25 amount of 168, and we're only left with 21,000. That's fund balance for 26. So comparing the apportionments from 25 to 26 for the individual school districts, the net change for Amherst is $198,351 increase. For Mount Vernon, it's $32,053. For Souhegan, it's $333.
That's
Sorry.
100%.
Oh, sorry. So as stated, these apportionments will be updated once the ADMA numbers are posted. I did budget for increases. They're not quite this amount, but they're close to this in your budget already. So you're not getting these in addition to what you've already seen. I know, I saw the panic. So there's a few other things for the board to consider tonight. I'm going to go into this one in a little bit of detail, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mike to talk about some other items. But one item is the building projects year-end balance to reserve account. So as a reminder, there's a SAU Brick School Improvements Committee, and they've been meeting over the past 2 years, I think, to discuss projects to maintain the brick school. So as a result of those meetings, the facilities director, Roger, and I worked to develop a draft CNA CIP plan, much like we have for the school districts. This plan seeks to maintain a balance of $30,000 in this year-end reserve as a safeguard against a large unanticipated expense like a boiler. So unfortunately for FY24 last year, we were not able to save any funds for this year-end reserve account. We had some unanticipated costs, primarily HVAC issues that were pretty expensive, and we had to replace a domestic water backflow prevention valve. I don't know what that is, but we had to fix it.
For FY,
For FY26, the recommendation is from the committee was to include an ADA ramp, and Roger costed that out at $26,500. And that would require a $20,000 budget in this building projects. The FY26 budget does not include that $20,000 currently. It just includes the status quo on the $7,500. The Brick School Committee hadn't met in a bit, so I just put in the status quo and wanted to bring this to the attention of the SAU board. So in order to fund that ramp, we would need to add an additional $12,000 to the budget. Other future projects included in the plan include exterior painting of the Chapel Museum, which is right next to the Brick School, working on the Brick School bell, refurbishing the cupola, remounting the bell, doing some re-roofing of the tower, and refurbishing the weather vane. So beyond the building project line that we wanted to bring to your attention, given the significant increase in health and dental and the really significant impact on the SAU budget, because it is truly so much made up of salaries and benefits. We, in between draft 1 and 2, we looked at ways to possibly mitigate the increase in costs. One way that we talked about was to offer a higher incentive to not take health insurance. So we're currently staffing surveying SAU staff to gauge interest in that. Right now, there are only 2 employees who do not take health insurance. Most folks who do take it are on a family plan. So the net savings for an employee of not taking health insurance would be about $25,000 if we offered a $10,000 incentive. We're also reviewing current plan offerings to see if there are any other options that could potentially save money. So that work is happening. Enrollment isn't until the spring, so we can't really budget for that, but it's something that we want you to understand that we're looking at. Another option to look at, there's not a whole heck of a lot in the budget besides the salaries, but you could potentially take a look at the merit pool that's currently budgeted at $5,000. The other considerations include the long-term planning line item. We did have a meeting with folks, and Mike can fill you in on that, and as well as other consultative services that may potentially be considered if there were significant savings to the budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike to talk a little bit more about that before I finish up.
Yeah, we still have some time before we have to finalize the SAU budget, and it gives us a little time to work. But as Amy mentioned, we are exploring a number of things because 5.9, it's not a percentage that we like. There's things that we want to do within the budget. to keep the momentum going. We feel really good about the work and the support that we are providing the 3 districts and the staff and the employees and you know, the work for the community. So I think exploring some different things, and I've talked to a number of people and we talked to amongst ourselves about, you know, ways to, you know, make this a bit more manageable and be kind of creative in it and talking to people and with buybacks, you know, people range, you know, and we thought, all right, most of our people are on family plans. We had 2 that we didn't expect to jump on to our insurance. And so right now we're sitting, you know, next year, 23 out of 24 employees will be on the insurance. And so we thought, all right, what's a way to do this? And we looked into it and I think we could potentially get anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 people who would be enticed by the buyback to do something else with the insurance. And then you take that savings, it gives you some flexibility, not only to save and reduce the percentage, but it also allows you to do some different things that we would like to. And because we have some momentum and because we have a number of initiatives and we have a number of projects within our portfolio, I talked to very early on Christy and Shannon about the possibility of bringing Steve back on a 2-day a week contract as a consultative service to support the work that we are doing, to have some consistency with negotiations, with facility projects, with mentoring, with evaluation, because we do have a lot of things in the air. And as you look at it, you have myself, we'll have a first person in the district as an assistant superintendent. We have Liz Cannon finishing her first year as a curriculum director. We have Heather Jennings in her first year as a student service director. And so we're trying to find ways to keep the consistency going because working in SAU 39 is complicated. There's a learning curve. There's 3 districts to support with 3 different cultures. You're going to get that resonation later into today's agenda. You're also going to get some conversation around long-term planning. And so for us, we're trying to find ways to keep the work going, to make things manageable. You know, last week, you know, Pete and some of the other SAU budget committee members, they looked at 5.3 and said, that's high. And we come back 3 weeks later, nothing out of our control, and it's 0.6 percentage points higher, right? And, you know, there's some things that we could take out, you know, some long-term money, planning money, we could, you know, maybe not do some of the funding on their improvements. We could look at the merit pool, right? Like there's things we could do, but not substantial. And I think doing this is potentially a good strategy. So we're exploring that. I just wanted to inform people where our thinking was at and what we're doing. And right now, I just think we have a lot of momentum and trying to keep the work going, but also make it as, you know, fiscally appropriate is where our heads are at. So, Amy, I can
Yeah,
kick
we'll
it
just
back to
finish
you.
up and then take questions. So this is just the final slide showing the meetings that have happened and scheduled meetings. Tonight is draft 2. There is 1 additional SAU budget meeting scheduled. And the final draft and public hearing is on November 21st. Once this budget is approved, then the apportionments will be, the exact apportionments will be included in the school district budgets.
Actually, if I can break with convention slightly before we do questions, and if this is a terrible idea, you can all shoot me. Could we invite Peter to come give his report and then we can ask questions of everything we've heard about the budget?
And then I think Terry probably would be best to talk about the Brick School Improvements Committee because she was consistently at the meetings and we talked about.
As an extra report or answering questions?
As part of this,
Discussion.
answering questions and discussion.
Do you have anything you want to share before we move to questions?
No.
Okay, so you're hanging on for Brick School. Terry's our expert. But Peter, if you join us and give your update at this chair right here.
You do have a board member with a hand up.
George, are you comfortable waiting on a question until Peter's done, or would you rather ask it now?
Absolutely, I could wait.
Okay, just in case you answer any of our questions. I imagine there's gonna be more. Or you make more, either way.
I gotta be honest, with you, I didn't prepare a specific report. I did take a look at the budget before I came here. I see, the increase. I'm glad you didn't expect me to come up and say, yeah, that's great, another 6.6%. I understand what drove it. I guess the concern I have that if it's health insurance, that's the major driver of this. It sounds like that's going to be reflected across, that's gonna be a similar problem across all the budgets of all the schools, which means the overall budget is gonna become one of these numbers that people can't accept. That's a worry that I have. I know there's nothing we can do about it. But I think just one of the things that comes to mind, I think we have to get the message across that, yes, we're doing things to address the healthcare. We are going to try to reduce it in the future. But there also has to be a message coming across about the benefits that we're getting by having the staff that we have. What is this doing to make things better for the students? And I gotta be honest with you, one of the things that made that jump into my mind, we were just reminiscing, my son's 27 now, so this was many years ago. When he was in the elementary school, he needed speech therapy. He couldn't get it through here because his grades were too good. They said it's not affecting his learning, so he's not getting any help. So we had to go outside and get that, separate. So I'm just wondering, now that we have expanded staff and more help coordinating things, have we addressed things like that? Is everyone getting the services they need? If they are, can we get that message out? Say, look, we know the budget is going up, but this is what it's done for us.
Yeah,
We've improved our educational quality by doing, X, Y, and Z.
the communications, I think you hit on a great point, and that's why we are so excited to add Katie to the SAU team to help get that message out to the community. So if you'll hang tight, I'll start with Mr. Torres and Mr. Glover. We'll kind of just go around and you can say pass if you don't have a question or comment, and start there. So Mr. Torres.
So thank you, Amy and Mike, for that presentation. So just two quick questions. Hopefully they're quick. So on the topic of healthcare, has there been conversations of the drivers on the increases that the SAU has been seeing? Typically, it's related to either a certain population or, you have frequency on usage of the plans, or it could be you could have a significant population that's using the prescription plan, which is coincidentally is probably the major driver. Most people are on some sort of prescription medication, which they probably use that more than the actually checking into a hospital. So typically that's what you would see. But has those conversations been had? As they at least explained as to maybe why you're seeing some of these increases year over year?
Yeah, Amy, you can jump in, but with George, just how you described it, more claims from our employees who are accessing, healthcare, and more people using prescriptions. Those come down to it. I think for us, because of the way we compensate throughout Amherst and Sauhegan in particular, we have people and in Mount Vernon, we have people who have been here quite some time, and they are well into their careers. And so that puts them in an age bracket that, they might be using more of the health insurance than they did 10, 15, 20 years ago, or their children, they have children who are at that age. So definitely all those things. And we met with Health Trust 3 times last year to kind of review why we are, and that's the conclusion that they gave us. And we spent the spring educating Mina the various school districts and employees to how to manage it. And we're going to continue to work on that, but it's all those things, George.
Okay, thank you for that. Then based on that, probably some of the conversations that need to be had is probably regarding plan design. And some of that would be, you know, again, it's probably gonna have to be negotiated, but then that's really what you're gonna have to take a hard look at, because I think as what was said earlier, it's almost, you know, we have to provide health insurance, and we're almost beholden to the agencies. Unfortunately, and I said this before, in New Hampshire, we have very limited providers, and the providers are actually a lot of them are consolidating. So it's going to become more and more expensive over the next few years. So, you know, there's going to be decisions that have to be made as to what we offer in terms of healthcare. I'm not saying that we don't provide it, but I think we need to start looking at if this is something that really is going to be a major concern. And, you know, obviously through people throughout the SAU, then you need to start having those conversations on how you can design these plans. Do you start increasing pooling points? Do you start looking at some of what's covered on the medicinal plans? Those are the things that you can do to drive it outside of, you know, maybe paying people out, because typically what we see is, yeah, you can pay certain people to not be on the plan, but that's really a drop in the bucket. You know, that's at some point you're going to reach a maximum of people that are going to be off of there, and you're still going to be beholden to these year-on-year increases. So anyway, that's it about healthcare. So thank you for that, Mike. And then the only other question I had was, is there in the operating budget, which I believe I know the answer to this, are contributions to the CIP? Because, you know, as I saw in that chart earlier, there's, you know, anticipation that there's going to be years that we don't contribute. And the way I view that is, you know, it should be something that's done ratably every year. You know, the amount could be, you know, determined obviously on an annual basis, but we should be looking at contributing that every year and not waiting until we get certain expenses. So anyway, that's it from my soapbox. So thank you.
Thanks, George.
Mr. Glover?
Thanks. My only real question is there savings anticipated for given the personnel change that we'll discuss later at the assistant superintendent level that's reflected in this budget proposal?
Can you repeat that, John?
Sure.
Yeah,
I-
no, I don't have that quite yet.
Would that be expected to be a decrease in the budget? Or TBD on that?
Not substantial, but yeah, likely, but not substantial.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, so I would like to, as a first go, and maybe it'll be our only go, start around the table and just if you have something that you'd like to ask or say.
Oh, starting with me, how about that? Not really know if I have a question. This is not something to get you in the short term, but I do wonder long term, especially as the building gets. Because I know we're doing this at Amherst, we have a subcommittee to look at all the properties that we hold. Is moving on from the brick something we should think about long term? Right, I mean, that's looking at the budget right here, facilities, draft. One, anyhow, if I'm reading this correctly, it's almost $75,000 just to operate. That's just a thought. That is not like a today thing. So.
Yeah. Terry?
To partially answer that, we actually have talked about where
As
it
brick
would make
school.
sense. And one of the reasons that brick school continues to be the most bang for our buck at the moment is that we don't have excess space elsewhere to go. It is a good location to where all of the districts have, they're fairly equidistant from it. And so, I mean, it's a little bit closer, obviously, to Clark and Wilkins, but it lets, all of the different personnel and our SAU personnel have to go to the other buildings, kind of have, it's a nice central base to be at. And honestly, it has a few bumps here and there, but overall, for a historical building, it's not horrible. Like, we charge $1 in rent from the Amherst School District, so it's a pretty good bargain in some ways. That being said, I feel like we have vastly underfunded that long-term list of projects. We thought we'd get lucky. We said, hey, we'll worry about it later. And it's just where we have worried about too many things later and we haven't had a good plan. We need to have a better plan, and I'm thrilled to see there be a plan and have there be priorities. And we have to adequately fund those priorities. Otherwise, we're just gonna be in the same boat where suddenly you've got this big balloon thing that you need to do and you can't keep waiting, right? We're already basically ADA non-compliant right now. And so I don't love that. If that is our public nexus of where we want our public to come and interact with the personnel, now do they have options to maybe meet in another building that does have ramps? Yes, we have workarounds, but workarounds to me are not long-term solutions. Those are meant to be short-term solutions, and there are too many damn short-term solutions and band-aids across the SAU. So this is one place where I don't feel comfortable for continuing to band-aid, right? We have to be realistic, we have to have a list, and we have to actually appropriately fund that list and have a plan. The lack of planning is not a plan. And so that's just where I'm at, that I'm really glad to see us being creative and looking at things like, I mean, right now, my husband and I, we do it every year, right? He has insurance, a wave insurance, we do the family, because it's a hell of a lot easier, because he never tells me anything. He's like, I don't know, I got an email, I think. So I always pick mine, because it's easier for me to interact with. However, if I got a really big incentive to really closely consider his, I might go, hey, that helps pay a premium, and it's worth the extra hassle for me to know you're gonna tell me nothing, but I'll just set up everything like it's me. So, I like that we're at least looking at some creative ways of saying, we certainly don't ever wanna say that our employees are not entitled to full benefits to them, right? But if they do have something comparable, giving them an incentive that maybe overall actually works out better for them. I'm really glad that we're looking at a way to say, can we find something that's a win-win, right? And so being able to even save some of that really helps bring our percentages down until we could look at our more holistic plans and look at some other ways that we could save. So thank you for getting creative, and thank you for understanding all that stuff, because some of that I'm just like, I'm so glad you understand it, because I'm just gonna trust you on part of it. It gets really confusing. I was telling him 7 years in, and still sometimes I'm like, sure, sounds good. But yeah, I think we explained it very nicely, so thank you.
Mr. Amber?
Yeah, I think, and obviously, the insurance.
Okay,
Maybe there's ways to. I'm not.
Ms. Drackoff?
I'm good.
Pass as well. Ms. Graham?
Two thoughts. So at the districts, we've frozen the higher cost plans for healthcare. And what, is that something the SAU has looked at to remove people off of those higher cost plans as well, given HSA and stuff?
One of the districts we frozen high.
Yeah.
We had one of the things, what was just said is we're going through a plan review to see how many people on there.
And
Should
move
we
them.
grandfather and look? Yes, we are. That's one of the pieces we're doing. Not only looking at the waiver increase, but also looking at plans.
Yeah.
We're looking at it.
Okay. And I know just like overall the cost side, in the SAU budget, I think the strategic plan consultants in there, which I know we're gonna discuss later, that's a thought.
Okay, I'm with George, and I'd like to make a comment that I think any incentive for someone to not take health insurance is a bad idea. But in this particular case, if one was going to happen, having it be of such an outsized percentage, I think the number mentioned is very high. So if we were going to have a planned buyback, I'd rather have it be more in line with what some of our teachers receive.
It is already.
Not the new one.
Not for me.
No.
So, one of the advantages of an SAU is, it's not collective bargaining. And so it's very difficult to make a change to a buyback within a collective bargaining situation. For example, if you have 10 teachers already take it and you increase it by 5,000, you've increased your liability $50,000 before you started, which means you have to guarantee 3 or 4 people to take the new buyout. If you don't get that 3 or 4 people, you've increased your liability and not increased your revenue. Here, we can look, and we can actually look at everyone and just apply it based to see if we can actually, if it works. So that's the advantage of the SAU, is you can look at, see how many people have it. What is the possible liability? The only current possible liability is only 1 employee. So you would only need 2 people to take it to ensure you had a net increase in revenue or a decrease in expense, whichever way you want. So that's the struggle in collective bargaining. It's very difficult to guarantee the savings. For example, in one of our districts, it was open and we guessed wrong. And the increase, just pure cost, did not pay for the increase in it. That was my first year here. In one of our associations, we were upside down and had to find it. And because we were hiring people, like one of the things you think about is you hire people under 26, they stay on the parents often, and then they get the buyout. And we were hiring lots of people in 26, so the buyout went a lot stronger than the original ratio. So you can personalize it more in an SAU without collective bargaining. So it's a bigger challenge to keep this equal to a collective bargaining situation, my experience. That's okay. Sorry about that.
But statement still stands. I don't think incentives to have people off. That's it.
It's fair. That's reasonable.
Great. Yeah, so I don't really have any new questions, just a couple of comments. Mr. Maresco, thank you for being here and providing your comments on services tied to, benefits and salaries. I think you're on point there. Terry, I appreciate you kind of following up on Jason's comment about the brick school. I do think that's a conversation we're continuing. I know we have the property inventory committee, so I would like to see us talk a little bit more about that. And just to piggyback on what Mr. Torres said, I was at the NHSBA Delegates Assembly this past weekend. Many districts across the state, as you can all imagine, are grappling with all of this with healthcare. The districts who are doing a little bit better and are kind of presenting as, case studies and what's going well in their district, talked a lot about looking at the plan designs. George talked about moving to consumer-driven healthcare plans, going away from the HMOs and things like that. So appreciate this conversation.
Yes.
You can be next.
So a couple of things about healthcare that's different. Health Trust was our vendor did some significant changes this year. One of which you've already seen. There's no more GMR in actual. The actuary will determine to correct what the actual is. That's one. Secondly, they have now changed plan configuration, which for consumer-based plans, you can no longer fund anything more than 50% of the deductible. What's happening in public sector, if you fund 100% of the deductible, that actually changes a consumer-based plan to a more traditional plan because you don't have any skin in the game. So those are 2 things. And the third thing that they've done is they've created a Medicare comp plan for seniors. So I don't know if everybody knows, but when you retire here, you can stay on the health insurance. You don't get the cost share, 100% of the cost share is you. You don't get the deductible, but you stay in the plan. And so when you're in the plan, you're part of the pool. You're part of the increase. So it's not just current employees, it's retirees who affect the pool. And what's happened now, and I just texted Amina because Amina's our expert in this, is because they've created a new plan, the retirees are going to be pulled outside of us statewide. There are some who are grandfathered, and I'm not completely, there's a Medicare Advantage, which is new, versus Medicare Comp, which is grandfathered. The Medicare Advantage saves retirees. I don't know why I'm looking at this game. So there are some structural changes to plans, making the ones with deductibles, which is our Luminos and our site of service, more consumer-based than they are right now, because we do in this district fund a high percentage of the deductible, reducing the, the skin in the game, if you will. And we're taking a segment of our populations out of the pool and more pool statewide, those who will join the Medicare Advantage. So those are just some things.
Follow up on it. That he just.
Hold on.
So that piece that says we can no longer fully fund the deductible. Because the SAU is not under a bargaining agreement, that is not gonna be grandfathered in. So that starts this year, that we're no longer, does that change? Does that decrease what we would pay into, let me think, into anyone's account? Because we're not funding the deductible. Does that decrease anything to us?
Yeah, I think it could, because part of the overall fee is the deductible plus the premium.
So that would be.
So when
there's
Amina's
an
on
effect.
it, Amina's looking at it
So
all.
that might see that in the draft, but. If there's any,
Yeah, Amina's on it, just to make sure. We are typically what SAU offers, they're linked, but you're correct. We are not part of a collective bargaining
so
agreement.
that's not gonna be a grandfather.
Right, I don't see
in.
any grandfather ability in them.
Hey,
So
Steven, can I ask a quick question before I log off? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, so did you say that the retirees, they are included in the pool or? Okay, the only issue with that is, yes, you get the benefit of additional individuals on the pool, but typically they're an older population. So they drive up the medical loss ratios. So that's actually a detriment to us because
Right.
you're getting, so that's the only thing I'm concerned with. So that's one thing you also have to consider as well.
So why I mentioned it was because that is now changing for anybody who joins the Medicare Advantage plan is no longer in our pool that will raise our costs. The only ones that remain in the pool are those who remain on the Medicare component grandfathered in. So there are significant changes to the structures that we may see over the next couple of years.
No. I think it sounds like Mr. Torres isn't able to stay for the whole meeting or.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I gotta jump in on another call. So
So we rather get that
apologies, guys.
answered for you.
all right, have a good night,
Yep.
guys.
Bye, George.
Mr. Gothier.
So the overall pool of participants, even though this is not collectively bargained, we're still same plans that we offer to teachers and the CBA units, and it's all part of that same pool. So in theory, if we pulled 20 employees out of Health Trust or SAU and got something different for coverage, that would have an impact on the other Health Trust plans for the other units, correct? Because there'd be fewer people in the pool.
Mr. O'Keefe,
I'm good.
Mr. Fritz.
Obviously, doing the incentives to get out, I think it's good people options and appreciate Jason and Jared's comments on the school. Good.
Sorry, can I just add one thing to the incentives thing that Andrew mentioned it as well? If you offer the incentive, is there a grandfather time period where they can't just come back onto the plan? So if they accepted this year for 10 grand, what prevents them from just signing up for the family plan or signing up for a plan next year? Or is that an annual incentive that they get?
Unless there's a triggering event. So somebody could easily come back after a month of taking that and then come back.
It's true. There's a qualifying event.
But there's no period of time where they're not allowed, other than triggering events where they're not allowed every year, they have to be given an
Open enrollment.
So they have to be offered the buyout.
Qualifying events, getting back on it.
So I think to Steven's point, then if you do the buyout, it would be like monthly, because there was triggering event. If you have a child,
25 years old, it's a hell of a carrot.
Right, you would,
Insurance plan and take an extra 10 grand on salary every year, or whatever the number is.
But Amy, I guess what Steven's talking about is if someone did take the payout and then there had a situation change that was qualifying, they talked to the plan, they would keep the entire payout and get the plan, or the payout is like additional monthly or per diem, per whatever.
Yeah,
per month.
For pay
Okay.
period, yeah.
I mean,
That's a really good question.
I thought of that for Steven's comment, thanks for that point.
yeah.
Mr. Bain?
Okay.
I have nothing new to ask.
Okay,
I appreciate the work you guys are putting in on this.
and
Not
last,
easy.
sorry, last call, if there's anything you thought of while All right, thank you, Peter, for coming, and we'll move on to the next agenda item. Yes, we will not.
So, we need a couple decisions, by the end of the evening. Right, and so we're gonna talk long-term planning, so we don't have to get into that necessarily right here. But we should get a decision on the funding of the brick school improvement fund. And if we want to, right now we have 7,500 and push on the table. Amy would like to know tonight if we want to add another 12,500 to that, or do we want to not make that the improvement? So that's really the question we had right now.
And we could push that out, another year, just delay it, so.
You're asking for an increase in the budget or asking for a?
It would be an
separate
increase.
warrant? Okay.
It'd be an increase to the budget, right? For us to put money in there to fund the ramp.
So there is a rule about unassigned fund balance, and being able to assign that like we do with the districts into a capital reserve fund. We cannot do that, correct?
We can do that,
With the SAU budget?
yes. The Brick School Improvement Committee looked at that and it was determined from that those funds could be, classified as.
Do we have to have a public hearing for that? To
No.
hold it?
No, the board, it's in there.
Yeah.
So no, the board approved that and that was a major
So-
discussion and it was changing the lease.
If I may elaborate then, what I would prefer is that we get on the same cycle that we've got all of our districts on, that we started up in Mount Vernon and trickled down to Sabine and Amherst, is to go ahead and take the unassigned fund balance at the end of the year and earmark that towards projects like this. Now,
So-
yes, we're gonna get into a cycle of taking those dollars.
So that's what we're doing.
But with the $12,000 that we're talking, we're not
So,
adding it to the budget then this year. It's gonna be removed from the unassigned fund balance that would go to offset the tax rate for next year's budget.
if you look at the. Yeah. Yeah, so the 7,500
Sharing screen.
is the line that if there's funds left over, that goes into the year-end reserve. And there's about $30,000 in that account.
Yes.
So in the current budget, we just have the 7,500. In Roger's plan, in order to fund the ramp next year, we would need a $20,000 amount budgeted in that account to be able to do this. My question is, do we want to start that now? Or do you want to just stick with the 7,500 in that account for this year, for next year's budget? And then pick up the 20,000 later? It would delay the ramp project.
And so what would be the problem with us increasing it to 20,000 from the unassigned fund balance for the other company?
You would be reducing the amount that's in the fund.
To offset for next year?
Yeah, and the recommendation is to keep about 30,000.
Okay.
So,
In the fund balance,
in the fund.
not not this capital reserve.
Oh, no, that's what it is. We're not talking about fund balance. In general, this is just the balance of this fund, not overall.
We're gonna tax this year, transfer at the end, we were unspent, spent the next year's capital reserve. That's what it's, we're in tax now.
That's what I wanted.
Yeah, right.
And
We're not taking,
what I'm capturing is we're not.
so I'm not sure which fund balance you're talking about. This is
So-
a separate fund.
Yep, so the SAU is unassigned fund balance at the end of this particular fiscal year.
Yeah.
Taking the dollars that are left over to then apply 20,000 of that into our capital reserve fund in this per se. To then go ahead and cover these.
So the fund balance is, it's a net from 2 years ago.
That's right.
Because we don't know what. And then a deduction of what was already reserved. So there's only $20,000 left from last year. So you're saying spend money that potentially left this year on this?
Because we're talking about next year's fiscal budget, yes. So do we anticipate that we're gonna have a signed amount left over?
No, we are
actually, we had an unanticipated, health insurance election for this year. So
There would be other things that are kind of in motion. So I know you
that would
said,
be for next year.
yes.
So for money for FY 25, I'm not anticipating a fund balance at all. Should concern about it.
So we have to
And then-
raise and appropriate.
Yeah.
Through the budget.
Yeah.
So to summarize, the ADA component to that building is the number one complaint that my mother and colleagues here, specifically from several residents, about their inability to access that space. And so that is a must. And how we do it is really being innovative and crafting and getting something.
How would you suggest bake sale? I mean.
No.
Putting it in the
We
budget.
gotta apply the extra sort of capital to it in the form of a operating budget. I believe that's something that we're gonna have to do. If we're not gonna be able to take a portion of this year's unassigned fund balance based on your concerns and apply it to the following year, this could actually be done next summer, then we're gonna have to add it. We'd have to add it to the operating budget.
And that 26.5 is gonna be 29 next year, so if we just keep kicking.
Yeah. It's gonna have to be done.
You can wait and see. I mean, but I can't guarantee what's gonna be left
Yeah.
over at the end of it.
The inaccessibility to that building is a huge detriment to our elder population and familiarity.
Any reason you can't let them?
Oh, no, it's okay. Just adding an ADA ramp gets people in the building.
Yeah.
To the first floor. We still have ADA accessibility issue. Like I find that building to be an issue and I'm not in the building, so but I think it's an issue in many regards, which is why I appreciated Jason's point about, is that the best space for the offices, but
Yeah.
I think we
agree
have to
with you. I
take
think
care of
there's
it
a
now, but I do want to point out that the ramp just gets people to the first.
Yes.
We're talking $20,000, it's 0.06% of the overall $3 million budget, so I don't know if it's worth. I mean, we did this a couple of years ago, talking about $10,000 chairs, until I finally looked at the calculator and said, this is the dumbest conversation. Not that this is dumb, but I'm saying in relation to our school budget, just give a number, so it's 0.6%. I mean, I think it's 20 grand. I think we gotta be more worried about the 89.9% for health insurance and salaries that's there. That's where you're gonna save your, any budget adjustments you're gonna make. So to me, I'll make a motion to, do I even need a motion for that?
I mean, you don't, I just need direction, whether I'm including it in draft for you.
And I agree, Tom. I mean, when we take a look at sort of the actual percentage rate, it's just such a phenomenally low a piece, but the yield is big in terms of access to the building. And yes, it's only the first floor, but there are people in the community that can't even access the building at all because it is on the second floor when you really take a look at it from the street's perspective.
If we get them in the door, there is a handicap bathroom available there and there is a meeting space that they can meet with
They can go to the
anyone.
conference room and stuff like that, instead of asking a member of the staff, for somebody who's disabled, to go up to the hill and meet in the village school or the high school or Clark Wilkins school to make that service successful. It's a no-brainer.
Can I ask you about that, what you're hearing?
Okay, actually, I'm so sorry, Greg. Well, are you all right if Mr. Fritz asks a follow-up?
If it's follow-up, sure.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to stay on this topic, I apologize for giving the order. Are you hearing that getting in the first floor is like the objective, or do you really need people to get up the whole
Yeah.
building?
So I can tell you right now, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. They can't even get in to speak to Amy or the superintendent, and the only way that they can access our school leaders is to do so by setting up an appointment with them traveling either up to Monterey, the village school, or the middle school or the high school.
I'm trying to understand if the ramp is enough, or if it's gonna be, the ramp is gonna be 1 year's project, next we're gonna need like an elevator to get up to the top floor. Like, I'm trying to understand, what are you hearing that's really necessary? It goes back to what kind of Jason was talking about, is the building the right place to be having these services? So are you hearing?
So
that
first floor is,
enough?
from my perspective, is the access.
They just
Right.
need to be able to get into the
Take-
building,
Okay.
not the case now.
All right, thanks, sorry for my.
So, and my comment here being, I see if we didn't put it in there, took it out, et cetera, I see this as an event that would, let us consider going down below $30,000 in that balance. So I'd like us to consider that whenever I'm making a decision whether or not to do it. But I'd also like to advocate for just adding the $20,000 to the budget.
Yeah, on that one, we actually did talk about that, like, hey, bite the bullet, do the once, go down lower than we'd like to. But it was literally last year, there was no heat. I mean, they couldn't not make that fix, and had there not been funds there, it would have been a real issue, right? Like, you've now got people who can't do their jobs because they can't come to work, because we can't all have their little space heaters, and that's not safe either, right? So, it's not a good trade-off to go to nothing. It's just not a safe trade-off.
Agreed. So I think we should add it to the budget.
Thanks.
Yes,
One thing to think about is as we go through a hiring process, if we have an applicant who is mobility impaired, that's
I think
serious.
if that happened too, we could discuss, maybe we rearrange how we do things, because there is accessible space. So offices could be reassigned in the short term at least. Any opposition to funding a ramp in some way? It's a good start. I think our direction seems to be, and stop me if I'm wrong, that we should proceed by adding the additional cost needed. Not seeing a lot of people not.
All right, thank you.
Did you also try to get a quote for they get the full building ADA compliant? It's not, we don't do that, but I think the Dan's point, I think we have to know what that might be.
So we have a brick school improvements committee. I think Terry's on that committee from your board, and Tom. So, we can bring that to that committee and do some more work.
And you said you had like maybe another item or something?
We're gonna talk about long-term
We are.
planning later in the agenda,
Mhm.
so
Thank
we
you.
hear know some direction on that.
The one thing, if I may be so bold to ask or request, is with our health insurance review that you guys talked about earlier about going through, could there be a presentation for this body in the spring? So we're up to date in terms of the review component, what the comparables are out there, more importantly, whether or not we need to affect a change for the following or subsequent year. Because consolidating that and really streamlining that and coming up with the most effective and efficient vehicle is really where our priority should
We can work with
not a
our.
legacy product that just clearly maybe not be.
No, but maybe an April-ish agenda item,
Yeah,
once we're through the election and new board is seated.
we can work with our HR director to work on that.
Thank you.
All right, so next we're gonna move into our board chair updates, starting with Mr. Gothier and Amherst.
All righty, thank you. So we met last week for our October meeting. Our budget was obviously the primary topic that we spent time on, 3.9% increase for the first draft, which we all just talked about, the health insurance cost being the main driver of that with staff agreements and the CBAs there. Did see a large decrease in paraprofessional needs in the special services department. And we are expected to have the same number of teachers next year, 63 that we are currently operating on this year. We do have a new proposed item to the budget. Instead of doing solely unassigned fund balance to fund the capital reserve fund, we do have a measure that we're looking at to add a separate warrant article to just generate 500,000. I think the number is to go into the capital reserve fund for buildings. And this is going to be used to help fund the AMS roof and HVAC project. Building and Grounds looked at a variety of different options and they recommended this idea. That the board is still noodling to be able to provide funds in that, so we can keep that project going without completely depleting or without the building fund or without having to delay that project any longer than it already has been for years and years and years. We will also be reviewing costing of the overall Wilkins project. We'll have more on that at our next meeting in November as well. We did vote rather to modify how we present the bond article on the ballot next year. And I don't know if this will be something that'll go forward. It may be something that the board will have to vote on every year. We have something like this. But instead of just doing the first year estimate that will appropriate directly from taxes, we're actually going to put on the first 3 years of what the bond project will be an estimated cost for. This will be in a summary section below the actual warrant article. And it will just outline year one, which is typically one of the lowest years, which is an interest payment. And then year two, it generally spikes up to the max before waterfalling down. So we're going to have years 1, 2, and 3 on there. And the administration is working with legal just to make sure we have the correct language, to make sure everybody knows it's an estimate, that it's not a concrete figure, but it gives people a little more transparency and showcasing clearly we're not trying to hide something or pull a fast one. Despite all the other places that information is listed. And then we met yeah, this week with the ASSA, we were going to enter into negotiations with them, quasi negotiations, where we're going to try to extend our current CBA with them for 1 year to get the administration and then to get Amherst back on an alternating cycle, where we're not doing 2 CBAs in 1 year. So AEA and ASSA were due up to come again next year with each other. And so instead of that, we're trying to push ASSA back 1 year with an extension. So this way, every year there will be 1 CBA that gets negotiated with the administration staff and then the respective school board.
Thank you, Mr. Gothier. Next, we will move to Mr. Eckhoff. Oh, nope.
Christie, I'm
You
sorry.
actually can.
We also, grading and reporting, we've transitioned to a system that has letter and number grades now. So instead of just a 3.0, a 3 or a 4, there's a corresponding letter grade that's going with this. So that transition has gone really well through Power School. Thank you, Power School.
At the middle school.
At the middle school, yes, for 5 through 8, and then coming up on the 29th, we actually have another virtual session to go over that with Kristen Gothier on a virtual session, just to give parents more exposure to that, how it's working with first progress reports coming up. So, thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Eckhoff, sorry.
No problem. We held our last meeting on Thursday, October 10th. We did hold it in our NPR room, because we expected a larger turnout for our building project update. And I would say we had, 16 to 20 people that showed. And we had good conversation. The first part of it was a facilities assessment report from the Harriman firm. The board is going to revisit this part of the presentation and review, similar to what we just talked about with the brick school, short and long range capital improvement planning. I think we were all a little bit, I'll say, surprised at how many elements of the school is. As much as we like to think our buildings is in great shape, we have a lot of pieces and parts that quote unquote have reached their end of useful life. So we need to be cognizant of that as we move in our planning stages. They presented varying levels of scope and project and 4 different options presented. Cost range was from 10 million all the way to 29 million, depending on how many elements we added into the project. There was no heated pool and no heated garage, but we're still at 29 million. Top end. The next step, Harriman will return, meet with the building committee to discuss the projects, also adjustments, likes, dislikes, etc. This will be open for the community as well, so that they can have a voice at those meetings. Also, a request was from the public to cost out what the staffing for a project would be. So the SAU staff is going to put those numbers together for us, how many bodies and what the dollar figure is for that. Steve, do you know, have we scheduled that meeting yet for Harriman to come back?
No, I think it's gonna be on the agenda for the next board to make sure we have the
Got it.
right direction.
Okay. We had our usual excellent principals report from Mr. Weckleiter. A quick report from Michael, which was great. Then Amy presented our first draft of the 26 budget. It came in with a nice number of 1.4. It is the first run, does not include any salaries that would be negotiated. One note, we are struggling to get people to volunteer for the various budget committees, so I've sent it out to my fellow board members to kind of step up and volunteer to participate, because we need a voice on these committees. So that's a little disappointing, but we continue to take anybody that's interested in being on our board, or not board, but on budget committees. Negotiations with the MBEA Teachers Union began. Our first meeting was, I believe it was Monday, October 14th. We met for a couple of hours back and forth, convened. We've since met, and we'll be meeting on Monday with round 2. And our next official board meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 7th at 5:30.
And now we'll move on to Ms. Grund for the Souhegan School Board report.
So we had a quick, we keep skylight update. We keep talking about our skylights. Our phase one has now become like phase 2 or 3, depending on what's put in the order. But we've had to redesign the skylights because they're tied into the fire suppression system here, and they're no longer made. And you can't get parts for it, so there's new redesigns of maybe some stationary skylights with other things that would open up as needed, so there will eventually be some construction around here for that, but we don't have exactly. We talked about our budget, quick interesting things I just want to say, the demographics for Sohegan. We have 42 CTE students this year. We have 290 kids enrollments in AP classes, 314 enrollments in dual enrollment classes, 351 participating in clubs, 314 participating in fall sports, of which there are 9 of those. And they've had over 10,433 hours of community service for this current graduate class. So I thought those were some interesting statistics. We do have a potential need for an additional hire to cover the required economics class. It's required by the DOE. There'll be 9 sections of the class next year. So we have to get those covered. Our draft one showed an increase of 2.9%, or an increase of $612,563. And that was without the correct healthcare increases, because we only had the estimates at the time. So we know there's some adjustments coming there. So Sohegan Finance Committee, they held their budget meetings last week, and we came together earlier this week to have really good discussions, which will be ongoing. And we receive our draft 2 this week.
Next week.
Next week, sorry, next week, jumping ahead. And our meeting next week is on Wednesday, Thursday. We'll be on Thursday. We discussed science lab renovations. So we received a letter from NEAS, which is a accreditation group, wanting updates on what we're doing to improve some of the science lab spaces as have been reported when they last accredited Sohegan High School. And so we reported back, we're looking at renovations to properly size the lab and improve the safety as well. So we have, we interviewed 3 architects. We picked Harriman as well. We believe they had experience working with schools and with science lab in schools. They had some really great innovative ideas, and they're very collaborative in their approach. So we're really happy with that discussion. So we're happy to have them work with us. And we just met with the committee to plan out the process to move forward with administration, our domain leader, Eric Foskett, the facilities director, Roger, and the members of our board. And so we'll start that process coming up. And we're not projecting any ballot issue for that this year. We're not at that point, other than maybe some architectural and engineering fees, but we wouldn't put a project on until next year. And then the last thing I just want to talk about was community council. So what's really exciting is we did a lot of training with the students this year, so they're really engaged. And they also are really engaged in the forums. So one of the things that's happening is the students, they're using the democratic process here. And there was a proposal last year that passed about graduating seniors being able to find out their class rank. Class rank is not something that's been done here at Sohegan. So it went through community council last year, passed, but there's an appeal process. An appeal was placed in the last week of school. So now they're working through that appeal process. And the students are using the forums and advisories to discuss the appeal, collect information, come back to community council, have a discussion, and decide whether the appeal they'll have to take a vote on that as well. So it's just kind of a neat example of how our whole community works together. So I just wanted to point out that, you know, democracy is working here in our school, and the community is working together.
Thank you, Grant. All right, we're going to move into personnel, and I will turn it over initially here to Mr. Superintendent Barry about a resignation we are going to accept.
Yeah, so there's two documents. One is a resignation letter. And you see it's from Steve Chamberlain, mentioned earlier in the meeting. It's effective June 30th. In a moment, I'd like to take a motion to accept that, you know. But before we get into this, I think I need to go on record that SAU 39 and the 3 districts have a lot to owe Steve Chamberlain. And, no, it wasn't, but when we met Steve Chamberlain, he was leaving a superintendency to be an assistant superintendent to work with administrators and teachers on improving our craft around curriculum, development, instruction, and assessment. And turn of events, one semester later, he's the acting superintendent, and soon the interim superintendent, and then back to that lifestyle that, you know, I can tell you, you know, is an impact on your family and your schedule. And so to run it back, to be gone one semester, have an agreement, I'm gonna retire, and then I'm gonna be this, and I'm not gonna have as many nights. And one semester later, you're back at that. And kind of was steady, was stable, was able to keep people in the SAU for a moment. We had a bunch of resignations on the table, came in, held down the fort, and, you know, it took a lot of effort and a lot of professionalism, navigated some difficult topics. And we have a great deal to offer him. Thanks and you know, appreciation for the work that he did. And I know the colleagues that I work with, principals and the administrators and the teachers who he's worked intimately with, this is a substantial loss, you know, as far as wisdom and experience and advice and consult. And so, but we're very lucky. And but he is resigning as the assistant superintendent. And so get a motion to accept it with regret.
Make that motion.
Mr. Gothier is making the motion to accept the resignation with regret.
I'll second
Okay, seconded by Mr. O'Keefe
with regret.
with regret. Any discussion? All right, we'll do the roll call. I think only Mr. Glover's online now.
Glover, yes.
Yes.
Beam, yes.
Emery, yes.
Kingsley, yes.
Friend, yes.
Stover, yes.
Gascoigne, yes.
Peters, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Regret, yes.
Fritz, yes.
Bay, yes.
All right, and then
The second piece is, we need to post an advertisement for an assistant superintendent for the 25-26 school year. We would like to, as you see with the timeline, begin this process tomorrow. It is a competitive market. I can tell you what I've done is I've talked to the Superintendent's Association. I had a meeting in Concord for Primex for Title IX. Their offices are located in that building. And I met with the executive director and the assistant executive director just to talk about the landscape of central office positions in the state. And, you know, potential like pools and who's looking. It is going to be competitive. There are jobs posted already, you know, a week, 2 weeks ago for like similar positions across the state. I still think SU 39 Amherst, Mount Vernon is a get-to place. But starting earlier, like we did with the student service director position, seems a wise strategy and a good move. So I'd like to do that and be aggressive with that timeline and try to, you know, have this process complete by Christmas. But we'd like to post tomorrow. Amina and Adrani are prepared to do that. So I'd like a motion to, you know, accept the timeline. And then eventually I need 2 people to serve on the committee in similar fashions. I know some people have. Terry, you served on a committee like this at one point for central office. Dan, I think were you in the room for that? Same thing, like when we get to that point, we're gonna like 2 board members to join us in on that process as well. So I would take any questions on the timeline.
I'll make a
would like-
motion to accept the time.
Accept the timeline.
Second.
seconded by Mr. Gothier. Now questions.
I have a couple of questions. Is that when the motion to accept the timeline, I like the timeline, it's aggressive. And it'd be nice to have the certainty for the future. Is accepting the timeline the same as accepting the process? Or would that be a separate discussion?
To me,
It's the same.
It's the same.
Okay. Then on the process piece, why only 2 board members? Why not like 1 from each board? Would you be okay with that, Mike?
I thought, I just used the same process that we did last time for the Director of Student Service. That's kind of how we got there. I'm indifferent if one from each district, if that's, makes people feel, more comfortable, that's fine, but I thought as a SAU board and central office, this is what we did last time, but we can add 1 from each. John, if that is good for your census.
I think it's just equitable for the represented districts to have their own representative, be able to report back to their own boards at their own meetings. That's what I'm thinking about there. And the other comment I had on the process was, I mean, ultimately, this is going to result in your nomination to this board, and this board will elect or not elect your nomination. And so I'd like to see the SAU 39 committee enter into the process at the application screening phase and be, able to be part of that collaboration from stem to stern, so that we can offer some feedback. Those on the committee can see how it's working and can see however many applications are received and understand, what the real criteria are from the inside point of view and get an understanding about that and why certain applicants might rise to round 1 versus not rise to round 1, and then why some might rise from round 1 to round 2. It's not something we've had a lot of exposure with during these high-level leadership hiring processes in the past, and I'd like to see us moved in that direction.
So, John, just quickly, like my initial gut on that is that from an HR perspective, that's a lot of information to put out to a wide group of people versus perhaps maybe just some thoughts when they move on of this is why we, the things that we identified and looked for in this candidate pool or something a little less specific to people's applications, but also different from the superintendent hiring process, which the superintendent was our employee. We sort of have relegated the hiring process to the superintendent for the SAU employees. So I want to be careful that we're not yanking that back from him and doing his job. And I think that the point of having 3 members on the committee is a good one. It's a significant position that does reach into each of our boards. But that's just my initial thought. But I'm going to move to Greg because he was next for speaking.
Okay, I forgot what I was going to say about this, but, based on what John said, I think one advantage is, John's talking about maybe is that Mike, I think Steve complements your skill set really nicely right now, and having someone that complements you well come back would be nice. I don't know it would be a problem, but it tends to be a human issue to like take folks that are kind of like you. Might be nice just to be aware of that. So I don't know if the board members would be in there or not. I'm not sure if that's really an issue, but I want to ask you is we had 2 assistants at one point, and now we have 1. Now with 0, I guess. We're gonna have 0, and we have 1 coming back. And so is that sort of the size you think is right? Is 1 assistant superintendent?
Yeah, I think at this point, 1 full-time assistant superintendent. And then I've shared with Christy and Shannon about, consultative services for various projects coming up and planning down the road. Like, for example, right now we have a lot of transition happening, with I mentioned around some facility work, from some negotiations, some younger administrators in the building, right, to evaluation work. And, there's some stuff that we want to continue on, right? But, Amy and I have discussed, we'll be in the same boat of transition in the business administration office at the end of next year. So same model of, aiding that transition when Amy moves on with someone who can support, the new BA or more people to do that in a temporary manner as you learn a complicated SAU with 3 different districts, right? And then So there's some other projects that are more, we're forecasting out that are connected to the framework and some of the long-term planning work that we may need some temporary 1 year because of the project. So I'm thinking about how to do that within the SAU budget is something that we're working on. We don't have the answer yet. But for me, Greg, to your point about, complimenting, one thing that I'm confident in my ability, and I think there's evidence of it throughout SAU 39, particularly Souhegan, is our ability to recruit or attract and retain high quality educational leaders and teachers. Obviously the way, SAU 39 is and the appeal of Amherst and Mount Vernon is, but also our hiring processes at various levels, gleans this. And then at the end of the time, I bet on myself. There's a lot of people who want to come work in Amherst, and there's a number of people who want to come work with the team of people that we put together here. And I'm real confident in that and always have been. And I think you see some evidence throughout Souhegan and SAU 39 of hiring as high quality people. And we did well last cycle with the assistant principals. If you look at the Amherst, with the 2 assistant principals there, the dean of students at Souhegan, and then, Janine Metro at Clark. And I think we can repeat that. And then with Heather Jennings, and Liz Cannon, I think we're well on our way. So Greg, good point. We're noted, but we take pride in it.
Oh, okay, Greg's all set, so we're gonna move on to Ms. Bean.
Yeah, I'd like to say that you're correct. I was part of, when Dr. Jennings came over. I thought it was an appropriate time in the process to have a wider audience. I think that you did a very nice job of explaining kind of the fuller pool that you had seen and how you had narrowed down. And we very much had the understanding that if we couldn't come to a unanimous agreement and we needed to start over, we could have started over, right? If you said, hey, if none of these, I think we were down to 3 by the time we talked to them, and said, if none of these 3 are really what we can all get behind and feel good about, then we open it back up again. And we all felt very comfortable with that as an option. But I do think that there has to be a certain amount of trust. I know that as a hiring manager myself at work, I pick and choose the people on my team and where I'm going to bring them into the process, because I certainly see a broader pool and I do the first cut down, and that's my prerogative, right? It's my team. And then I make sure that it's a good fit and I bring my team in when it's appropriate, the other members of it, but I'm the leader of my team. And so it is my responsibility to take that and say, okay, here's the short list, y'all. And I trust you as our leader of our SAU team to bring it down to the short list and then broaden it at that time. I think it's appropriate and it is certainly expected, and you have a good track record and I'm comfortable with that. So I'm fully okay with this plan. I think it's worked well and I like the consistency that we've had. And I think we've had more consistent results with a more consistent process.
Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes, I'm going to be very brief, and I want to echo exactly what Terry said. The consistency is extremely important in situations like this. And I do think it's very insightful that you're involving board members who I actually don't view as board members in this process. I view as community members. So they can be a voice of the community in the actual process, and we're picking the best candidate for our 2 towns. And I love how you have it, laid out. I could actually see 3 people versus 2. So I think John's got a good idea there. Is that a make or break thing for me? Absolutely not. So if your preference is to have 2 versus 3, I'm on board either way. I like what we've done here, and I think it's going to accomplish exactly what we want to do, is hire the right person.
I think, it's kind of like that thing. We had 16 or 17 people in the room, and I was trying to keep it reasonable, but what's the difference between 18 and 17, right? You know what I mean? And so I'm okay there with 3 and that makes sense. So appreciate it.
Do we need to modify that motion then?
No, because the number of people.
Just accept the process.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it
we're
does
just
list-
accepting the process.
Well, it does list 2 members on the process though.
Yeah, I'll amend it. So it's great.
At what point do the board members jump into the cycle?
They jump in on the week of December 2nd, when we put the SAU committee together.
Got
Right there. And that date hasn't been set. It's just a week right now, Pete,
No, that's fine. I just
so.
didn't
There
connect.
could be a lot of snow that week, and it could be the nice.
Sorry.
Snow.
Ms. Graham?
So yeah, very quick. I'm just gonna echo a little bit quickly. I agree. I'd like to see 1 from each district. And I don't think board members need to be in on the original screening process. That's not our expertise to look at the resumes and understand how they fit exactly. I think our expertise is to understand how they fit to the community once there's been some screening done. So I'm okay where we fit in the process.
Shannon?
Yeah, so I will just echo the last two commenters and call the question.
Okay, so this is to accept the timeline and the number of members is below the timeline. So that requested board action. I don't think we need to make any amendment to the motion. We can just accept the timeline process.
So it says requested board action to provide SAU 39 board members.
Right.
And I support.
We're gonna make sure it says 3. If we need to amend that, we can. In my reading of this, it ends at the week of December 16th. But I'm happy to amend so we know for sure we did it.
Yeah.
So would you like to make an amendment?
I
to
will
the motion?
amend my motion. I made the motion.
Okay.
So I will amend my motion to say, I motion to accept the timeline, with the change, to 3 board members, 1 from each board.
I will amend my second.
I don't think we have any problem with that from the consensus, so roll call vote.
But
starting with-
before we go, could I just respond? Because this notion of like lack of trust or we should trust, my point is not coming from a position of distrust.
Listen, John, for a second. We can't revisit it right now because we're voting on an amendment to change just the 2 board members to 3. So now we can unmute you, but we're not allowing me to tell you that the only issue on the table is an amendment from 2 members to 3 on the timeline. We're not voting on the timeline yet.
Okay, fair enough.
So now, Mr. Glover, would you like to approve or not the motion to amend the motion to add a 3rd board member?
Glover, yes.
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 Amber, yes.
Eckhoff, yes?
Kingsley, yes.
Friend, yes.
No.
Gascoigne, yes.
Peters, yes.
Gothier, yes. That's yes.
Okay, now we're moving back to the motion as amended. Now, Mr. Glover, if you would like to make a follow-up point, this is the time.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there seemed to be a tone of an interpretation that where I was coming from was from non-trustworthiness, and that's absolutely not true. Where I'm coming from is deepening our collaboration with each other and understanding how we think. I mean, I for one would be very curious to see what kind of pool of applicants are we receiving? What is that range? And ultimately at the end of the day, the superintendent is going to make his nomination. That's his decision making. But also at the end of the day, we are going to elect his nomination or not elect his nomination. So it's a little different from Terry's work situation. There, at the end of the day, it's an agreement between the 2 of us, our body and his office, as to this person. And so the earlier we have opportunity to view the process, see the pool, listen. Wouldn't even imagine we might even participate that much, but some feedback along the way and an ability to report back and have a vote of confidence among ourselves that we like what we see, which would be my default assumption is that we're going to like what we see. It only enhances and deepens the trust that we all hope and wish is there in the first instance. So I see having board member involvement as early in the process as we can muster as a collaborative effort, and will yield the best result possible when it comes to the nomination and election time period. That's where I'm coming from by suggesting this earlier board
Mr. Glover?
involvement in the process. Yes.
The only option open to you at this moment for this is to make a motion to amend the process.
Okay, then I move to amend the process to include the SAU committee at the application screening process and all steps thereafter.
Is there a second to that motion? Seeing no second, I'm sorry, the motion fails. Now we're going to go ahead and vote on the original motion, beginning with you, Mr. Glover.
Glover, no.
But yes.
Beam, yes.
Embryo.
Eckhoff, yes?
Hinckley, yes.
Run, yes?
Stover, yes.
Gascoigne, yes.
Peter, yes.
Scott, there, yes?
Keith, yes.
Fritz, yes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Yes, Mr. Keith.
If I may quickly, I don't want Mr. Chamberlain to walk out of here thinking that we as board members don't appreciate your service. I just know we're gonna be working with you for another 6 months. And I think the majority of us are gonna be holding those comments until your last meeting.
Yes, yes. Oh, there we
I don't
presents
want
and
you
flowers and all.
thinking that
No, I
that
prefer.
Mike Barry shares this horrible news about you departing. And everyone is
We're
just
unprepared.
like,
Yeah,
quiet. So I just want to be very clear about this.
Well, thank you, but Mike broke already the deal once, so we're good.
You have no deal with us.
Yeah.
No such deal. We're gonna move on. Yes,
Sorry,
sir.
follow-up question. When do you want our,
Oh.
can we do that at the next meeting?
No, right now, the three people.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom, because I was so excited we had a motion passed. I was moving on. Yes, so let's start with the easiest path. Is there someone from each board who is passionate about serving on this committee? Please notice that in the timeline that we just passed, you do have some duties during holiday weeks. And maybe Mr. Barry, if you want to just say when you're going to meet the board members, so we can think about our other obligations.
So what you'll do is after round one, whenever that is, you will get a kind of an interview packet, an interview guide. It will have, the candidates that we are bringing to round two. It will have some competencies. It will have some questions. It will have, information for you to be prepared to be in that room. And then typically what happens, we bring in the committee 45 minutes to, roughly an hour before the interviews start. So we can go through what we're going to do in that room. So it is definitely I would say anywhere from a 4 to 6 hour commitment on whatever day we choose, starting like early afternoon, 1, 2 to however we need to get to, so we try not to go to like 8 o'clock at night. So if we have 3 candidates that we are, or 2 candidates that we're gonna bring in, that will determine how long it is. If we have 4, it'll be longer, right? So it all depends on that. So you have to be pretty flexible, early afternoon into, early evening on that particular day, and then just be well read before you get there. Besides that, there's not a whole lot of work to do beforehand. And we'll go,
So it sounds like the board members are involved in the round 1 interview, but not the round 2?
no, round
Oh,
2.
round 2, not.
Yeah, but after round 1, you'll get the materials.
Okay, and perfect. So then I just want to make sure everybody was aware that this is like a commitment where you might need a day during the holiday season. Now, is there, who might be interested from each board?
I can volunteer for some meeting.
I can volunteer for Vernon.
Perfect. So Mr. White
Or
or
either one of us, we're happy to.
Mr. White for Amherst, Miss Beam as a backup in case the
Okay.
holidays are too busy for Mr. White. Ms. Hinckley from Mount Vernon and Mr. O'Keefe from Souhegan. Everybody good with that? All right. Thank you all for stepping up to serve. I think we're ready to move on from personnel now.
All right,
Long-term care. I'm sorry, we're not ready to move on from personnel. Ms. Grund, what would you like to say?
Nothing, I said I just wanted to make sure that to respond with.
Well, we didn't have a motion or anything, so if there's anything.
I
more that
didn't,
needs
I
to
didn't
come-
have, I wasn't, because I know Glover's on, and I couldn't hear whether he was interested, I haven't had a chance, I just wanted to make sure that.
This
Yes.
one of situations where the boards should make a choice on the boards.
Well, we agreed to do it tonight. We amended the timeline, so unless we're gonna stop and form right, in caucus right now, we,
If you prefer to be on it, Dan, I can.
I
yield
don't.
to-
I just want to make sure no one was hurt, that's the only reason I just wanted.
I checked for a hand before I moved on.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I'm good, but I just wanted to make sure.
All hearts clear before we move on. This is the only moment to complain about this. All right. Now we're gonna move on to long-term planning. So I was not here the last meeting, so I was reviewing the notes from it. But we agreed to move forward with the long-term planning and we had some discussion about the piece where we might hire in an outside consultant. And I think there was some good support and reasoning behind having a facilitator. But when we met, Greg and myself and Mr. Amber and Anna, we also had the same concerns that we've all talked about earlier this evening about the SAU budget, about the 6% increase, and about whether or not this body still wants to move forward spending money on a facilitator, which, Ms. Fazy, is that in this budget draft?
Yes.
Okay, so it is, I said leave all the money in because we can take it out easier than putting it in. So we came up with sort of 2 or 3 directions, sorry, that we could go. One direction, not my recommendation, but we could just do nothing, no long-term planning, tell the community too bad, we'll get to you some other year when we have money. We could also continue on in our original direction with the original timeline that we laid out, continue to leave that money in the budget. And then a third option that I think the consensus of the group was that there's a good deal of work that we could do among ourselves as board and community members with the help of the SAU leadership to prepare documents ahead of considering hiring in an outside person. And so I think you all have in your packet, I had opened in a different place, but what we've done so far with a new, I think the second page gives you a new draft timeline of what that might look like. And so we just have kind of got this timeline through February, because then in February, we'll seat a new board and we might be ready, sorry, March, after February, we'll see a new board in March. And so then we will evaluate if we're liking the direction, if this is working well and what the next steps might be. And so that's just my disclaimer as someone who sat on the committee meeting that we had this month. And then I will turn it over to Mr. Berry for more explanation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So when we sat down, we met October 15th and we started to look at things and seeing where the SAU budget was trending, seeing some of the timeline, some of the conversations that we were having. Then I talked to principals and SAU employees about what we could do this year. Because I do think it's important to keep the momentum going, because there's been good work and substantial work happening. And so, you know, hearing kind of, you know, the feedback from the group that met the other day, they're like, all right, can you put together what that would look like? And so there's a timeline in there, but there's also an explanation a little bit more in the superintendent's report, if you got into that a little bit. I do think with the number of initiatives and portfolio that we in projects that we have within our kind of portfolio of work right now, I do think getting the community to see what we're doing and interact with the framework and taking it in January and putting it in front of certain stakeholder groups, putting it in front of certain parent groups, bringing people into the brick to take a look at it simultaneously while doing these other projects would be good feedback for us. Do I think there's long-term planning that needs to, you know, take place more formally? Yes, right? Absolutely. But I don't think it is in, next year during the 25-26 year. I do think we can go through a process this year, evolve the framework, review the framework to see kind of how it's being received by teachers, students, building administrators, families. And I think that will start to get our work more out in front of people. Right now, I was talking to a couple people. I said, we're struggling with participation and interaction and collaboration from our communities. We're struggling. So I want to kind of like take the opportunity to take it to people and say, we have specific things we want you to look at. We want feedback around this, and there's a process and then protocols we can go through as we work. And the group that met with me, you know, he's kind of like driving this, and they're the advisory group saying, hey, this is where we can get some more engagement from our community. And so I do think it's attractive for this year to pull out the long-term planning and this, continue on with this, interact with stakeholders, and keep working on our work. And I think I'm open to feedback on that, but I think that's where my head's at right now with it, hearing what the committee said, and so I'll take any kind of questions. And I know Christy has some opinions, but Lee, you were there as we kind of grappled with this, right? And and others, right? Like, you have some thoughts on it, but that's kind of where we are as of today. It's nothing's finalized, right? But we just want to have more conversation on it.
Any comments?
One more thing as a follow-up to what I said. And then. The one thing I did ask is that if we move forward with this, this become a standing SAU agenda item. And suggest that each board might make it a standing agenda item so that we're continually having the conversation.
So I guess, to me, I don't see why number 2 can't happen while number 1 sits in the background. I know that we want to try to save 15,000, which is 0.45% of the budget. So, and if we don't use that, because that would not be spent until next year, and I think we're gonna get to the point where we're gonna do all this work, or this committee's gonna do all this work between now and February, which is a very short time frame, I might add. And then what are you gonna do at that point? Like, are you guys gonna put together all the PowerPoints and all the slides and the graphics for the strategic plan? I guess my question is, what happens after February 2025? And I'm not advocating for spending the 15,000, I'm not advocating for hiring somebody now. I don't think that was part of my intent anyway. My understanding was gonna be somebody we would hire after the work is done internally. This is more of that PR piece where they're able to put the stuff together for us. But I guess I'm curious,
So
why can't 1 and 2 happen at the same time, with 2 being the focus and 1 being planning for next year, whether we use it or not?
It can. I'm just saying what we changed to make this year more robust, because I think the framework, the difference between a traditional strategic plan, in my opinion, and I've done a lot of research around strategy versus strategic planning, and as my last 18 months as superintendent. But one of the things that I want to keep at the forefront of whatever long-term plan, strategy, strategic plan we have is the components of the framework. It is a learner-centered framework that's literacy and math and quality of instruction. So facilities and operations and finances, that's part of a strategic plan. But what I want to keep at the forefront for our students, our teachers, our admin, our families, our school boards is the learner-centered pieces like literacy and math, and supervision, evaluation, and instructional time. That needs to be, and when you look at strategic plans, that's just like one of the pillars, but I want that to be the part of it, and the other stuff fit into that to support that one. And I think this gives us a process to go through with people to continue that conversation, get people more comfortable with what the work is here, how we're achieving the mission through this process. So I think, Tom, that's the part that's different for me, is a commitment to make that the forefront of it.
This definitely seems more fleshed out than the conceptual ideas we talked about last month, but I think that this is where I thought it would probably go anyway. So this is not, that's why I'm not like, oh, this is super relevant. Let's, blow up the whole thing we talked about before. I think this is part of that overall process. Because again, it's going to come down to, I think we've seen this in this community, until I have a piece of paper in my hand that says SAU 39 strategic plan, there will be a lot of people that aren't happy with it. And it's going to be semantics and it's going to be eyewash to a certain extent, but that's what people are going to want to see. So unless you get that document at the end that says strategic plan, I can pull it up on my computer and go, oh, it's beautiful. And then in 6 months, I forget that it's even there. So that's my only feedback. So I support
I appreciate that. I've heard that.
Yeah.
So I spoke to Anna, like before she did come, and she did mention that the thing that you said very quickly, Christy, was that each board for each of our meetings they'd come back and make sure the board was involved in the process by gaining feedback throughout at every single meeting. So then that would get back. So my assumption is the people that are currently on this committee are the ones that are going to continue on the committee. Am I right on that?
Yes, I think so. That's,
Okay.
I think that makes the most sense. And that group was a good representation of the whole SAU board.
So the rest of the boards, everyone does get involved at each of our meetings and make sure that feedback goes back. I just wanted to clarify that because there's something Anna said to me I thought was extremely relevant.
Yes,
To make
so
sure
that we're,
everyone was thinking.
exactly.
Okay, so kind of fine to what Tom said, adding some more information from our long-term planning. we talked a little about strategic thinking. In addition to having a plan, and Tom mentioned, sort of the risk of all this work is that we check a box with it, and that's the end, right? We put a plan on a website and forget about it. I think what we really need is strategic thinking. So one thing that I like that Mike's done, at our meeting was the progress and had the outline numbers tied to the points he's trying to make. So when he's taking decisions about curriculum, it's strategically thought through. It's not just part of a framework, but it's done strategically, not tactically. Not saying, well, this curriculum's expired, we got to buy a new one. That's top of the list. Let's buy one of those and move on, right? So I think that's probably a weakness that's going to be hard to overcome. I don't think a consultant with PowerPoint's going to necessarily fix it either. So I think there's probably an opportunity for all of us to think about when we're making motions and we're making recommendations, how does this play into a larger strategy? And if it violates it, why? Why are we doing things outside of strategy? And so that helps us keep it as a representative of where we're heading and how we're acting. I think what I would recommend doing, I like the Tom's idea was a lot, but what I was planning on doing before I heard Tom's comments was to say, let's continue to discuss it within the community and try to have that strategic attitude. And maybe in our board meetings, when we make motions, we can talk about how it's tied to the progress or tied to the strategy. And get in the habit of acting strategically. I hate that word, by the way. I don't know why I have to the word. I can't say that one word of all the words in the English language, but strategically, and support that thinking style as we go forward. So I'm also okay with the 15,000 if that's something that is okay with the budget. But more importantly, is our attitude, I think, going forward. Thanks.
Mr. Huff?
I would not be in favor, I know it's a small number, Tom, but I would not be in favor of earmarking them right now. I'd like to see the committee keep working on this. But to Tom's other point, I agree with it. You get, say, the end of February and you've done all this work, then where does it go? But the question is, we've got a communications specialist or director, or whatever her title is.
Coordinator,
Thank you.
very benign.
But, I mean, this information is, community facing, and I would think that would fall under her.
Yeah, so to your point, I hope people can see the framework in the daily operations of SU 39 in the districts. We have it attached to agendas. We have it goals at the board levels, built off of it. We have at the building level, when you get your principal reports, you can see the initiatives and the priorities of their buildings directly linked to it. And so for us, it is going to be something that we continue to revisit. And the reason we can do that is because it is learner centered. It is things that we have to do as educators is around literacy, math, curriculum, assessment, instruction, right? Getting better at our craft. So I hope, to your point, Tom, it's not on a shelf, but you see it living and there's evidence of it, right? And we'll continue to flesh out how that looks, right? And I've been in the educational business for a long time, and I've worked for districts that had strategic plans, and I've worked for people who had strategy. I've worked for people who are just mission driven with goals. But lots of time, unless people are revisiting and making it part of their daily lives, it's one of those things that is often kind of forgotten about, on the regular. But we hope this year, as we interact with the framework, you will see, there's the priorities, there's the action steps, and then what we're gonna, kind of display to people is you're gonna see the moves, the evidence of the moves that we are making to try to achieve those outcomes. And so that's the part that's kind of missing in the framework that you don't get to see. You see priorities, action steps, outcomes. Well, in order to carry out those action steps, building administrators and teachers are doing things on a regular basis to make that happen. We hope to make that come to life to people. And as the year goes on and as the years go on. So I think to your point, that's kind of how it lives, but you're right. There's a population of people who want that document that's 30 pages long, that's pretty, that they can have hyperlinked or starred on their computer, right? And I get that, and we'll get to there. But I do want to find a way to get more community participation and getting this in front of people before we get into like strategic planning, formal process. And this is our intent with that.
And he swayed me with the fact we have a communications coordinator who can do some of this graphic work and this presentation work, so I support that.
Yeah.
I just go back to one of my all-time favorite movies, Tommy Boy, and if you remember the scene with the T-bone steak and the warranty conversation, they want it on the box, so I just never seen it, go Google that, but you can
It's a
understand.
big part of my childhood.
On the box.
I don't know the on the box reference, so it sounds like I have to give this, yeah, let's have to do some. So, I think that long-range planning doesn't have to be, doesn't have to be just a bureaucratic exercise. The whole purpose of this is for sustained success and growth in our district, for accountability and progress tracking, community engagement and trust, which we know our communities ask for this. I think the framework, definitely, I support you, Mike, and it needing to be out there in front of people, getting families and community members to engage with that. That's really work that the SAU supports. I think as a board, part of where this is coming from with long-range planning is how we as boards manage our growth, how we have financial stability, and how we're holding ourselves accountable, to the community, right? That's part of what we're developing with the long-range plan. My understanding of someone to help us facilitate some of those questions around those topics, right? So not just the polish on it and making it look nice, which we certainly have folks who could possibly do that here, but helping us grapple with some of those questions about, how we plan for growth or how we, manage some of these things. So, I don't have a strong feeling on whether that 15 goes in this year or next year, but I do fear that it's always going to be one of those things that's easy to put on the cutting room floor. So if we're really committing to this, then I would like to just commit to it and get it done. So I do have to leave. Thank you. That makes sense.
Go to Ms. Beaman just 1 second. I just wanted to clarify, it's not my understanding the facilitator would be a person doing graphic design or communication of what we're doing, but more a person helping us assemble some information that's outside of our ability to grab ourselves.
I think it's all of the above, right? Because that's what we did when we did the master plan committee in town. They produced the report, but they also helped us do the surveys and gather the information. So it's an all encompassing service where they would help us get the information, do some of the research for us, and then at the end, they compile it all together in a nice little package so that it looks good. But either way, I think it sounds like so far, we're on the relatively same page. That option 2 is a decent way to go.
Well, Sean, we'll hear from Ms. Beam to see if she thinks.
Spoiler. No, I'm not gonna laugh. I honestly think that it's a nice compromise. I feel like, I like what you said, that there are multiple pillars. And this is the pillar that we're focusing on first, and it's the most immediate, and we're gonna learn some things from this pillar and build some relationships. I think everything in life is relationship related one way or another, right? And so I think if we build those relationships, we build up some of our communication channels, we do some things with this pillar first and really get into the practice of, because one of the big things that strategy does is it helps you say, is what we're doing, does it feed into what we said our priorities are? Because that's what your strategy is. What are your priorities? And so everything you do should feed from that. Well, this is a very clear way for us in the work that we do day to day to say, here are the priorities, is what we're doing feeding into these priorities. So we're focused on this pillar first, and that's fine. We're building relationships, it's important. We're working on our communications with the understanding that we need to go broader to those other pillars. And that it's not a put it off forever thing, but I'm okay with focusing on this first and really honing those other things with this first. And then saying, okay, let's do that broader. So with that in mind, that we're not saying no forever. And if I had to pick, I will say 15, 20,000, I'm asking for 20 for one. If I give up the 15 for this, I'm happy swapping that to do a physical need immediately and having the time to sit with this and go deeper into this pillar before we go into the other pillars.
So we don't really need a motion. We are going, it sounds like the consensus is we're going to move forward with our work that is on the table. But what we do need is some direction from Ms. Casey about the budget and what to do with that number. Do you prefer a motion again?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Or just a consensus if you want that I'm removing it, 2,000. Yes.
The floor is open, friends.
I'll make a motion to not include.
Is there a second? Mr. Eckhoff, any further discussion? And can someone see if Mr. Glover's hand is available or interested?
I don't have a hand raise thing, but I would like to make a comment on the process. I'm okay with the 15,000 in or out. So if the decision now is on the 15,000, we can proceed, but I'd like to make a comment on the process going forward.
He wants to comment on something else, so.
Okay, Mr. Glover, do you mind if we vote on the money and then we'll circle back to the comment?
No, I don't mind. It seems to be, the order of things as previous. So let's dispose of that
Perfect.
and go back to the process.
Perfect. Since this was a motion only dealt with the money, is there any more comment on the money? Okay, then, Mr. Glover, we'll start with you. The motion is to,
Not put any money on the budget for this, sorry, it's the initiative,
long-term planning.
long-term planning in fiscal year 20.
So Mr. Glover, you can vote first.
Glover, yes.
White, yes.
Yes.
Embryo.
Eckhoff, yes.
Yes.
Friend, yes.
Stover, yes.
Here's yes.
Gothier, yes. Keith, yes.
Fritz, yes. Dave, yes.
Okay, now, Mr. Glover, I'll circle back to you for a comment on the process.
Okay, in the documentation in the agenda packet, one of the sub bullets under option 2 was to evolve the committee. I don't know precisely what that means or if there was an idea of what the evolution was, but I would like to see that committee. I mean, this, in my view, this is a very important committee. And only having one board member represented on the committee, I think, is a disservice to the committee. I mean, we have 2 representatives on policy committee, which works quite well. And that's also a very important committee. So I'd like to see 2 members from each board on the committee going on a going forward basis. It's really helpful for a board member to have a fellow board member present, and those 2 board members can work together to bounce ideas off of each other and help communicate what they've heard to the rest of their boards along the way. I think it's a very effective and helpful way to distribute the leadership of committee members.
So John, can I comment on something? Like, what we're hoping to do is keep it as a standing agenda item in November, December, January, February at the board level to report back, to get feedback on the process. And when you look at the meetings, the planning group, right? The strategic planning committee is only going to meet probably 3 times, throughout that and maybe have email dialogue, but they're going to bring everything to the board. And there's going to be discussion and conversation at the board level before we make next steps, right? And so I think that was the thought process, as opposed to getting people more commitments, because we are pretty overextended and throughout SU 39. But Christy, I know you had something to say.
Well, I'm gonna let Mr. Fritz.
I have a question from Mike or somebody. If we double the committee size, just more I'm considering. So is this committee is subject to the public, right to know information at a public meeting? Is it all that?
No.
No. So if we had double this, we had 6 people up there and only 3 of us could make it, it's not a problem. It's still.
No, I think, and I think part of, and I had only heard maybe perhaps that Mr. Glover had this concern, and that's why I asked that it be added as an agenda item to all of our meetings, and that a good deal of the discussion work might happen at your individual boards, and your board representative would bring back the insights of your board, just to make sure that we meet for a very short amount of time. There's not, if you add 6 of us in there, in addition to the other members of the committee, I feel like we would not be able to have the robust discussion we are having. That's just my thought. Again, we are at the position where my recommendation is that you leave the committee with the 4 members. So I serve as well as one of each of you, my recommendation, but I'll entertain a motion if
Well, it sounds like John wants to be on this, just bring compliance here. So is there any reason why you can't just come to the meeting?
Well, we already have two SAU board members on the meeting.
No, I understand that. I was wondering, you're saying we're gonna have three or four people, right, at the long-term planning?
Yes, two from Sauhegan already.
Right. Well, okay, whatever. You can say it's one from SAU, whatever. So you got 4 people total. Is there any reason why John can't come as a forum?
It is now
right now
an
it
issue
is.
at this moment.
It would be, okay.
It's actually
Now-
not an issue for quorum because 3 Sauhegan
It is now,
members don't break
John,
John,
quorum.
it is. John,
it
it
is.
is, things have changed and it currently is a quorum issue for our
We'll
board.
be discussing that next week at our meeting.
So anyway, all that to say, even if we change this, you already have 2 Sauhegan members sitting on here. I don't know what the temperature of this group is. Someone would like to make a motion that we add additional members to this committee, we can entertain that. But I'm
Well, I
not,
stand by my comment, it's not about my participation on the committee. That's not where I'm going with this. It's as a practice, it is better practice for 2 members of a board to be present on a committee so that they can help each other deliver the information. They can have 2 points of view, listening to the same information. It's just a better practice overall. And I would encourage Amherst and Mount Vernon to seek a second member for their own benefit. It's not about me as an individual. This is about us as an institution and how we operate.
okay, I think we have received that point. Is there any further discussion?
I have
About this.
another question about the second sub bullet under option 2 is talking about the superintendent, senior leadership team, and principals to prepare a summary of SAU 39 and the constituent districts' accomplishments during the previous 3 to 5 years. Well, I mean, that's interesting. I was looking to have why will not also include the SPCC committee in that preparation to offer feedback in real time as to what those accomplishments are, and I might also add, accomplishments and challenges. I think it's should be a holistic summary that the leadership with the committee participants at that meeting or a series of meetings to figure out what the accomplishments, and I would add, let's say opportunities for growth are in previous 5 to 3 years and where that stands going on a going forward basis. So I guess that's two comments. One is to include the committee among that group, and 2 is to not only look at accomplishments over the past 3 or 4, 5 years, but also, challenges, growth opportunities, learn from that data to see where we might go forward in the future.
But I believe that group of principals and admin leaders is going to bring that back to the committee to review. So I think that they're to help put it together, and in the review, it seems redundant. So I think that's why Mike and teams will put it together, and then the SPCC or whatever the acronym is, will have the opportunity to review and then bring up any other items that they consider accomplishments.
And bring it to their boards, right?
Yeah.
And if people can recall, I'm going back to like the honey hole from last year. We started the framework development at this very meeting last year, and we went to get it out by the deliberative. So it's essentially the same timeline. And there is some urgency because we do have some momentum. And I want to be nimble. And so some of the steps, John, that you're seeing in here, we will have the opportunity to talk about challenges and opportunities. But for this, I just wanted to, because there are a lot of good things that have been happening in SAU 39 in the various districts and at the building levels and around data. So that's why we have there, but we'll communicate that out. And John, that is noted, and I appreciate that. So we'll keep working.
Okay, fair, fine. I just want everyone to know all the things I've said tonight are centered around framework for progress goal number 5, which is to build and strengthen partnerships. And I'm looking for opportunities to build and strengthen the partnership between the administration and the school boards. I think there's improvement where we can make in there, and perhaps through this strategic planning process, we'll finally make some steps towards that. So
Okay, I think
that's my
we have
impetus.
Our last item is the superintendent's report. I assume you've all gotten a chance to read it. Are there any comments that you want to
Yeah,
make?
so I just wanted, we talked about long-term planning, you got, talked about budget, I appreciate that. You see some of the framework stuff that, we're gonna continue to update. Those are some of the moves we're making to support the goals and the priorities there. We'll continue to update this board. I did want to update on transportation though. It still is the highest priority and, I was joking, kind of with people the last few days. We've had some pretty consistent transportation. We've had 13 routes with 13 different drivers, a majority of the end of last week and this week, which results in a bit more timely. And I'm like, people are like, oh, we're having a great bus day. And I'm like, our standards are so low that we're getting to school 10 minutes late and people are calling it a great bus day. Or we're getting picked up, kids 3:35 and we're clearing 3:48. Right? And we're improving, but it's still not at the standard. So it's something that we work on a regular basis. Amy, Karen Sainsbury, myself. I've been in conversations with other transportation companies about supplementing routes. We're continuing those conversations. It's complex in the middle of a year to do that, but we are continuing to work on that. I hope to have some more firm information around that later. We also met with Butlers today. Steve and Amy had the opportunity to meet with Butlers today to talk about some of the things that they promised to do and where they were at and checking in with that. And so we'll continue to work with them to hold them accountable to their contract. But for right now, I will take the small win that we've reduced the routes from 16 to 13, and we have 13 different drivers as opposed to multiple routes around. So that's the update there. Mount Vernon doesn't feel the brunt of it as Amherst does. And, but we're continuing to plug away on that. And hopefully I'll be able, by the next meeting, I'll be able to have a more firm update on some things. I'll take any questions about the report other than that. And I appreciate the conversation around long-term planning and budgeting. So thank you.
No busing questions. Okay, so on the report, I think you had on there, when I browsed it, about seat time, class time, right, something like that. Number 4, I just wondered, we had things like the booster-thon happen, we have things like Christmas parties coming up, we've got, what I call leprechauns going to take over Wilkins maybe again this year. I mean, do you consider that stuff to be a threat to seat time?
I think for me, it's not seat time. I kind of look at it as instructional time and everything matters. When you are, there's all different types of activities that are healthy for schools at certain levels. And it has to be the right balance of those, of that, right? And we have had very candid conversation with our administrators throughout, like the importance of instructional time, the importance of, kids acquiring content knowledge and skills and making sure it balances with some of the other activities that you just mentioned. And the high school has their versions of it and the middle school has their versions of it. But I think you're going to see a more cognizant effort to balance that a bit better than maybe we have in the past. And so you'll see that, but we still want the educational experience to be really good for kids and kids excited about being there. And some of the things you mentioned do get kids excited about going to school but it's a balance. So thank you. Yeah.
All right. See people packing up. So if everybody is all set, I will call for the public input 2 of 2. If no one here,
See any hands up?
and no one not interested in speaking online, is there a need for a motion for non-public? Great, then, this meeting is, we'll do a nice roll call to adjourn tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Steppinger moves to adjourn. And seconded by Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Glover,
Glover, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Ron, yeah.
Stephen, yes.
Peter, yes.
John Deere, yes.
We're leaving the meeting, you say yes, we leave.
Yes.
All right, good night, everybody.